we good to go? Jan Kutsia, am I audible?
Yeah, that's correct, Chairperson. Sorry, I was muted here. The speak on the laptop.
I think my mic is. Jan, can you?
I can hear you, Chairperson.
Okay, good. Are we good to go?
Chairperson, I just want to have a look. I think we're not the quorum yet. Member Maseko has not joined us yet. Mr. Mvimbi also and Mr. August are still. I'll just follow up with them.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Member August has joined the meeting as well.
Okay. Pardon me. Good afternoon, members, and I wish you a warm welcome to our Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works. Today is the 3rd of May, and this meeting will deal with one feedback from the department with regard to the 4th quarterly performance of the previous financial year. And secondly, the department will give us an overview of the Easter weekend road safety statistics and the road safety plan for 2020. Thereafter, we will consider in-house committee reports and minutes, and we will then formulate also minutes appropriate, resolutions appropriate to the outcome of today's presentation. Now, can I have an indication of the members who are present? My name is Derek America. I'm the chairperson of the Standing Committee, just to establish if we have a quorum. Members, could you just indicate your presence?
Good day, Chairperson. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Thank you, member. Any other members present? Well, let's see. Maseko, I see you present.
Yeah, I'm present. I've been struggling.
Okay, so fine. Thank you, member. I think any other members who are present?
Member van der Westhuizen is here.
Yes, he did indicate his presence. So, colleagues, it seems as if we're the only members present. We are curated. So, welcome, members, and where we have a fruitful meeting this afternoon. With us, could I just ascertain from Mr. Kutsi whether we have any apologies for the record?
Chairperson, no, I haven't received any apologies.
Anyway, thank you, Mr. Kutsia. Colleagues, as you know, this meeting is taking place virtually on the MS Teams platform, and it is also, our proceedings also broadcasted and live fed on YouTube. So any other interested person, institutions or stakeholders may tune into the channel and follow our proceedings. By now, all of us are fully conversant with the rules of engagement on the MS Team platform, so I will not repeat those rules. Safe to say that we have members of our technical staff on hand to assist members who may require technical assistance during the course of the meeting. Could I also ask members or participants who engage with the content of our meeting that they may choose to switch on the video cameras, and if not, not compulsory really. Just that they should just be aware that once they have concluded the input and participation, that they disable the video function and switch off the mics so that we could improve the broadband quality of the feed. Unfortunately, members, we do not have interpreting services available, and it would be appreciated if we could conduct the meeting in English as a medium of communication. But should there be a compelling need for a member or a participant to express him or herself in the language which he or she is more comfortable, I am not going to stand in the way. We will then make a way for the necessary interpretation if need be. Also on the platform, we have the Minister, Minister Dalen Mitchell. Welcome, Minister. And we are very pleased that we once again can engage with yourself as well as the department headed by the HOD, Ms. Gooch. Also joined by her senior team that will be to introduce us, as a result of the presentation and the discussions that may flow from there. And then after that, as I was saying earlier, we will have the in-house procedures and documents and reports that we will deal with. Having said all of those things, I would warmly wish to welcome the Minister as well as Ms. Gooch, who have, and the senior team who have joined us this afternoon, and I'm sure we will be well informed in terms of the performance of the department and why there was certain lack of performance, for a better word, but all of those things will be sort of clarified during the course of our engagement. So without much further ado, it is incumbent upon me now to ask the Minister and welcome the Minister and ask the Minister if he wished to make a few opening remarks before we will then move right on with the presentation. Minister Mitchell.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, Chair and colleagues. Chair, with your indulgence, I think we can go straight into the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Minister. No problem. I take it that, Ms. Gooch, it will fall upon you to direct us further with regard to the presentation, and hearty welcome to our meeting.
Chair, to you and to the members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity. As you mentioned, we've got a number of staff, senior staff within the department present in the meeting this afternoon. I think if, with your indulgence, for the sake of time, I'm not going to introduce each of them separately. Should we need to call on any of them to assist in providing any responses and feedback, then we will gladly do so and ask that the relevant person introduce themselves. What we do have.
Most welcome, Ms. Gooch. Just I see Honourable Mbimbi, I see your hand. I do recognise you.
No,
It's
my
the point of order.
apologies. No, my apologies, Chairs. I think I just mistakenly pressed it. Sincere apologies.
Okay, no problem. My apology, Ms. Gooch. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. No hassle at all. So we do have with us today Mr. Keegan Carr from our monitoring and evaluation team, who is going to take us through the presentation on the fourth quarter performance report. I would like to flag and request that the committee understands, of course, that this is preliminary in terms of information. We are, of course, now going through the annual reporting process where the performance information is verified and confirmed. So there are some areas in the report where, and I'm sure that Mr. Carr will pick it up and make reference to it, where information is awaited from kind of a national system or so on. So I would like to just flag that upfront and acknowledge, therefore, that the information that is being shared with you is and should be considered preliminary while we go through the necessary other processes as a department. And then also to acknowledge that the indicators, as the committee would be aware, are also outlined and explained in the annexes to the annual performance plan of the department. And as a result, the indicators are very specific about how the data or information should be accounted for. So as an example, if it says that something has to be completed by the end of that quarter, if the project wasn't complete on the 31st of March, but landed up being completed on the 1st of April, it will show as not being complete in the quarter under review. So I just want to flag that as well, that we do have to make sure that when we put the analysis together around the performance, it is very specific in terms of the descriptions of the various indicators. So Keegan, would you mind, as I make a couple of more introductory remarks, if you wouldn't mind to start to share the presentation, please, if you're able to do so? Thank you very much. So perhaps just one or two, if you don't mind, I'm going to take us through a couple of the opening slides, Keegan, and then hand over to you. So the first, if we move on to the next slide, it's just a reminder to the committee that the department has got 6 budget programs, as well as then the trading entity, Government Motor Transport, and we therefore provide our quarterly performance within and on the basis of the various budget programs. And it's important then to also understand, if you move to the next slide, please, Keegan, as I've mentioned, that the indicators are differentiated between those that are set at a national level. So as sectors, the transport sector or the public works sector, we agree on the particular indicators. So there are some that are national indicators that are then set and every province is required to report on them. Then there's the provincial ones, which are trying to align the work and provider reporting to the provincial priorities, for example, the jobs priority of the Western Cape. And then the final one where we narrow it further down on a departmental level to pick up on areas that are important of the performance of this department. So we have indicators that are then sitting at a departmental level in terms of their formulation and reporting. The next slide tries to then give, and I'm sure the committee by now understands this environment within which we work, but it's important to remember that the targets that are set while we review those on an annual basis when we look at the annual performance plans, it's important to remember that they are done so within the context of understanding the environment at that point. So when we presented to the committee in February 2021 for our annual performance plan of 21-22, and we're now reporting to you on the fourth quarter performance, as we all know, a lot has actually changed in the environment in the last quarter of the previous financial year. We've had pressures in terms of the economic climate that we have found ourselves in as a country, therefore also the impact on the Western Cape. We have seen what's happening globally in terms of not only the pandemic, but now also, of course, the geopolitical situation, that all of those things start to play themselves out in the performance that we see, and eventually in one way or the other can have implications for the performance of the department. The impact, of course, on the cost of doing business as we see the input costs increasing, particularly now, and I know it's in the current quarter, the dynamics of fuel price increases and others, those also then impact. And while we've got the environmental factors impacting, there is a limited ability within the system to necessarily change what was originally set from a target point of view, as you well know. So it is just a reminder for us that our environment isn't one that we are able to control completely, as we know, and that certainly does have an impact given the nature of the work of the Department of Transport and Public Works. So the next slide, I think, just tries to give a sense of some of those factors. We clearly still had the COVID lockdown regulations as they started to shift and change in the last quarter of the financial year. We had provincial traffic also still working with SAPs where necessary. We've had service delivery protests, the impact of the minibus taxi, violence on and off, and some of the unsettledness there, as well as then the pandemic. And if we think about the impacts of the pandemic in other parts of the world globally, an example is that the ports in Shanghai and China have become incredibly backlogged, and therefore certain materials and content that we are required to bring in or our contractors are required to bring in isn't necessarily able to be delivered on time. For example, one of those is the lift program, the replacement of lifts out of Germany and Europe. So just to give you a sense that there are numerous factors that obviously impact on the performance of the department, and Mr. Carr will try and give a sense of a few of those things as he goes through the various programs. The next slide, I think, then just again talks about some of the elements that I've spoken about, but there are some positives that I don't think that we must forget, of course. We do still try to make sure that all services are being delivered. There may be some disruptions here and there on and off, potentially when we've had to shut an office for a short space of time, maybe for sanitization as a result of COVID in that last quarter. And then, of course, aspects around some of our constraints in the supply chain and others. But there are also positives that we've been able to bring about and continue to bring about innovations and new ideas in the work that the department does. So I think it's at this point, Chair, that if you're comfortable, I will hand over to Mr. Carr and ask him to then give the overall performance information context, just so that you get a sense of that, and then take you through the subsequent slides in terms of the budget program by budget program, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have thereafter. So if you're comfortable, Chair, over to you, Mr. Carr.
Good afternoon, honourable members, Minister, colleagues, and thank you, HOD, for the introduction. And with regard to the overall performance information in the context, sorry, my screen. Overall performance information context. The presentation focuses on a graphical approach where we've color-coded the the performance, and that in blue being 150% and above, which is an overachievement. The green 100 to 149, which is achieved, and then those that have not and partially achieved being under 100%. The presentation primarily focuses on the over and partially and underachieved, and that is how we will move through the presentation. For the fourth quarter performance, there's a reasonable, say, 50-50% split in terms of the targets achieved versus the targets not and partially achieved for this quarter, and how this relates to the year-to-date performance. There is a change, not necessarily significant in terms of that, but it is an increase in terms of there's a 63 to 37 split in terms of the targets achieved for the financial year versus those not achieved. And as the HOD has alluded to it already, the red that you see in program 3 is based on the EPWP figures, which is the jobs, the work opportunities created. The national system has not yet released the stats and figures for the work opportunities created for this quarter, which impacts the year-to-date performance, and this will only be readily available on the 6th of May, which is on Friday. So going through the budget programs, the focus here is the number of transport integrated processes. They only had one planned target for this particular financial year, and the focus there was the B97 taxi route between Bellville and Paarl. This was affected by the violence on this route due to taxi violence. And there were surveys due, onboard surveys due, that would inform the integrated plan. This, however, could not happen due to the violence on the route and the route being closed, and the surveys then not being collected to inform that ITP. For Program 2, Public Works Infrastructure, the under or partially performing indicators in Program 2 as the annual indicators is the number of utilization inspections conducted for office accommodation. There were 3 offices that could not be inspected, and this is due to it being vacant, and vacant for either permanent or temporary reasons, that they've either moved buildings, the occupants have moved buildings, or temporarily moved due to maintenance on those buildings. The number of hectares of land released for social economic purposes, there was one particular project that was given back, or the land was given back to the department, and that was due to the adjacent vacant land together were reserved for housing development. The adjacent land is owned by National Public Works and Infrastructure, and they indicated that that particular land cannot be used for housing development. Hence, the Department of Human Settlements then giving the provincial owned land back to the department to be registered on our asset register. The quarterly indicators for Program 2, the number of work opportunities created for public works. As previously said, we are still awaiting the EPWP national figures, and that will definitely increase the quarter and the year-to-date numbers as they are projected there. The number of infrastructure designs ready for tender. The underperformance is due to budget constraints in the design phase. However, the annual target for that indicator has been reached already. The third one is the number of facilities completed. There were no new facilities completed within this quarter. However, the annual target has been reached already. The last one to report on this particular slide is the number of maintenance projects completed, and that is 2.5.2. The underperformance is at 54%. And the reasons for that is there were some delays, and this is based due to COVID-related incidents linked to the contractor for this particular quarter. However, the overall year-to-date performance has been achieved already. Moving on to Program 3, Transport Infrastructure. The number of road construction projects completed, they did not complete all the projects as planned for this particular quarter. And there are 3 projects, the Stanford Hermanus, Bainskloof, and Ashton and Montague projects that have not been completed due to environmental and contract delays in those particular projects. The red that you see highlighted there, it has been explained already in terms of that we were waiting for the EPW figures still to come in. The partial performance in Q4 linked to the number of maintenance projects completed is due to the planned maintenance projects being completed before or in earlier quarters, and the annual performance target has been reached already. For Program 4, the annual indicators, the number of routes subsidized, this has been impacted by the COVID regulations and directions imposed through the national lockdown, and that had affected the number of routes that the Golden Arrow bus services have been traveling over this period. The quarterly indicators, the number of kilometers subsidized, they have a 72% achievement rate for the quarter. However, the year-to-date figures or year-to-date annual figure has already been achieved. The trips, however, is sitting at 80% for the year, but this has been impacted due to COVID and how many trips could be facilitated through or operated in a quarter. The HOD already mentioned the taxi violence that has also had an impact on the trips operating. Then Program 5, the annual indicators have been met. The number of compliance inspections have met their annual target. The quarterly indicators, we're focusing now on the blue, the overachievement and the reasons therefore. The number of traffic law enforcement operations conducted. The target was exceeded due to an intensified operations, which is aligned to their tactical focus for the Western Cape. The tactical focus looking at farm workers in the Cape Winelands, West Coast and Overberg areas, as well as ad hoc operations like fatigue management operations. The number of vehicles stopped and checked is aligned to the same tactical focus. And then the number of road safety awareness interventions implemented. The Road Traffic Management Corporation had requested that scholar patrols and the procedures be audited. This has resulted in an increase in monitoring and auditing of scholar patrols, which is clearly reflected in the overperformance for that quarter. Program 6, community-based programs, the annual indicators, the underperforming is the number of beneficiaries participating in contractor development program. This is the first time that this indicator is reported in our APP, and there is an underperformance, and that is due to a high number of dropouts on the program related also to COVID, and participants coming back on the program after much of the delay in the past financial year. The number of public bodies that are underperformance in Q1. The reason why it is reflected as such is it is a non-cumulative indicator, which has now got all 39 EPW reporting bodies within the province reporting currently. GMT, there is the number of vehicles traveling more than 1,000 kilometers per month. The target is a demand-driven target. And the underperformance is also due to fleet usage during this during the COVID-19 era, the client's not particularly traveling very far. The number of automatic vehicles has also been underperforming, but this is also a demand-driven indicator as to the requests for automatic transmission vehicles. The annual indicators, there is one, which is a underperformance. It's the number of stakeholder surveys. The stakeholder survey that was expected to be concluded in Q4 has not yet been concluded and will only will be concluded in Q1 of the new financial year. The next two underperforming indicators are highlighted in green because the less is actually more in terms of the number of fines processed. The target was 6,000, where the department GMT only processed 3,694, which means it's better than expected, and that is the same for number of crashes and losses and incidents processed as well. Less is more in this case. And with that, I conclude with the presentation. Any questions? Oh, sorry, I have one more. Number of vehicles inspections carried out. This has also been an underperformance or underperforming indicator for all 4 quarters, and this is also due to the physical nature of the inspections. They have put in mitigating factors and innovations like taking photos of vehicles. However, the number of inspections has still not met the required target as planned. Thank you.
Keegan, thank you very much for that, Chair. I think that tries to give you as succinct as possible a view of the fourth quarter in terms of the indicators and the performance that was reported. And of course, they would all be captured eventually once everything is finalized into the department's annual report. And we would, of course, also then be coming in and explaining ourselves to the committee as far as the overall performance is concerned. But we're happy to try and explain as much as we can and clarify anything that may be required from you and the members of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gooch, and thank you, Mr. Carr, for taking us through the presentation. We are very aware that, as you earlier indicated, Ms. Gooch, that much of these sort of figures for the fourth quarter are in the process of being also verified, and there may be changes here and there, but I am very sure that those sort of adjustments will not be material in terms of the what you have shared with us today, but we note that sort of remark. So colleagues, we will deal with this presentation in its entirety firstly, before we will move on to the second presentation. So I'm opening the floor for questions, comments, for remarks, or whatever you wish to express here. I will entertain your questions and remarks within the bounds of reasonability. I note Honourable Maseko. I note Honourable van der Westhuizen. Any other member who wish to make an input? If not, I will then start with Honourable Maseko, and thereafter I will take Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Maseko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope my voice is not going to disappoint me. It will bear with me until I finish asking my question. I don't have a lot of questions, and again, I need to appreciate the department for coming to honor us with their presence today, and also the minister. Chair, just a few questions on the issue of the number of crashes that has been processed. There is, I think, about 800 that is still outstanding, I think, for the last, from the fourth quarter. So just for the info for me is in that instances, how does the department report? Is the department going to carry it forward to the first quarter of this financial year? And the reporting, how is it going to be? Do they add to that? Or how are they going to do that? And then what is the impact of, if they had to report on the 800 that is still remaining, what is the impact to their reporting if that didn't happen? How do they sort of justify not reporting crashes that happen? What is the importance of that reporting of the crashes? And if it's that important, sort of how do they mitigate to make sure that they are reporting as they do the planning for the new financial year, also give the indication of what is needed based on the information of that fourth quarterly? I hope they do understand what is it that I'm trying to find out. And then maybe the last one, it will be the last slide that we saw of the number of vehicles that the target that was set for inspections, the GMT. Also, I think the achieved was 49%. So does that mean that the 51% was not inspected, or maybe it's just the high level technical weight that is being used by the department? And if that's the case, maybe to help me to understand, I mean, we are now getting into the system of talking the language of the public works and transport. So I'll appreciate to have the understanding about it. Chair, the voice is going. Let me keep quiet for some few minutes. Come back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Honourable Maseko. You were cracking up. I know you're not fully recovered yet from your incapacity, temporary, but I appreciate your presence here today. Honourable van der Westhuizen, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and I do hope that my internet connection from my side to you is better than the one, what they call downloading. But Chair, I first want to say thank you very much for this presentation, and there are really a number of achievements that I am absolutely delighted by, such as, and let me just see, it's page 23. I don't know if that's the page number at the bottom. I don't see a page number there on the transport regulation one, program 5, where really the number of vehicles stopped, the number of vehicles that were, it seems to me, weighed, etc., exceeded your targets, and for me that is fantastic. I think we want to be known as a province where the rule of law is applied, and where it's better to stay within the laws than to transgress, and particularly the number of traffic law enforcement operations conducted, and where only 1,700 odd was planned, and where the actual achievement is more than 4,100. I really want to commend the department on that achievement. Chair, if I may, there are a number of questions that I have. The first one is, if I heard you correctly, you said that some of the contracts for the upgrading of roads, etc., were delayed, and one of the reasons had to do with environmental issues. And I would like to know a little bit more about that. I do know that environmental issues could probably also include things like rainy days, but my impression is that during this fourth quarter, rain did not play that much of a role. And I presume you are referring to environmental impact problems. If you could expand on that and just perhaps inform the committee what can be done to preempt such environmental issues in order to try and resolve them before construction work is commenced with. The second one is, Chair, the GMT report with the number of automatic vehicles. I noted with appreciation the number of vehicles making use of, I think you call it alternate fuels. Again, perhaps if you could share with us your findings in that regard. But then can I ask that the fact that the number of automatic vehicles were not achieved, does that in any case have to do with the replacement of vehicles program, where, for example, due to a lesser demand for government motor transport, that therefore some of the older vehicles were not in need of replacement? Or to what extent have you been affected by the international shortage of certain spare parts for vehicles? I've been led to believe that some computer equipment, the processors used in computers were in short supply, and that many manufacturers apparently experienced huge delays in the manufacturing or being able to deliver vehicles that were ordered, and that there are some long delays being experienced and problems with the availability of vehicles. And then lastly, Chair, the HOD did refer to the fact that these targets actually can be broken down into national versus provincial versus departmental targets. And I was wondering if she would be so kind to just expand a little bit and inform us what of the targets do they believe to be important performance indicators, and which ones are not national ones, but ones that might be unique to the Western Cape. And Chair, if I may just refer, some of these targets seem to me, such as the number of fines processed, etc., as if overachievement in some of those targets may be sending out a mixed message. On the one hand, it might say, but we are losing the battle for people to abide with the law. On the other, so a decrease in that target or in the achievement could also mean that people are starting to, drive within the law, etc. So some of these targets, I don't know quite whether I should interpret that as as genuine achievements, or whether they are actually sending out a sign that things are not well, even though you're overachieving on some of that. Perhaps if you could just help us, how should we interpret those kinds of targets? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Any other member would like to make an input or ask a question? Okay, before I hand over to Ms. Gooch to respond to the questions, and I would like just to add to one or two questions, and that the whole notion of less is more, I like that. And if we look at the number of traffic fines processed, in terms of the identified targets to be achieved, and we have overachieved in a sense in terms of that, as stated on slide 29. And similarly with the number of crashes and also the number of inspections. Now, I'd like to know, and I may not be available right now, or in terms of the various depots we have, a breakdown of the these annual or these figures in terms of you know, so that we could possibly get an idea as to where greater focus need to be placed in terms of various depots in relation to these number of fines, process crashes, and inspections. And then secondly and lastly, is that due to the delays that we experience as a result of a variety of factors, what are the, if any, budgetary implications of the delays? Will we be able to, or will we be able to spend, you know, if not all, you will never be able to, but will we achieve our expenditure targets for the financial year, given the various exogenous factors that impacted upon the non or partial completion of certain projects? Thank you. Ms. Gooch, I will hand over to you, and then you can direct your team to deal with the various questions.
Chair, thank you very, very much, and to all the members of the committee, thank you very much for the questions that have been posed. So I hope I've understood them all, and if I haven't, and as per usual, if I don't give a sufficient response, please do, through your chair, of course, pick up and clarify if I have misunderstood in any way. So the first question through your chair from Member Maseko about the crashes processed, I believe that she is referencing the indicator within GMT about the number of crashes and losses incidents processed, where the annual target was articulated as 3,000 and the actual that was achieved was 2,277. That gives you roughly the 800 that Member Maseko was referencing. What it does not mean that 800 round figures have not been processed in terms of what was received. We are saying that we've only received and had reported 2,277 incidents. So in other words, fewer incidents of crashes and losses have occurred than what we anticipated in terms of a target. And therefore, so it's not that there are 800 of them that carry over to another reporting period. That was the number that was received and dealt with in that particular time. So handed over, and it then may not have been completed in terms of processing, of course, but we received 2,277. And to an extent, Chair, that picks up, if I may just jump to Member van der Westhuizen's question, where there are some indicators where an underperformance is actually a good thing. And I would contend, for example, that that is one of the indicators. So in other words, if there are fewer losses and crashes, that's a good thing. People are driving more carefully, one would hope, as drivers of government vehicles. Where there is an indicator about number of traffic fines processed, 3,964 versus the 6,000 in terms of target, that implies that there were fewer traffic fines that were received to be processed and that were processed. So again, it means for all intents and purposes, better driver behavior. So an underperformance, which for most people then seems like a bad thing, in these instances with that particular indicator is a good thing. And that if there had been an overperformance on those indicators, then that would be showing a decline in the proper kind of driver behavior and so on our roads. So one does have to, as you correctly say through your chair to Member van der Westhuizen, that there are some of those indicators that have been formulated where you do need to read them with a great deal of focus and circumspect to understand whether and now I've been dropped.
You're back on?
We can hear you, and you can hear you, HOD, loud and clear. Maybe you can't hear us.
My apologies, Chair. The connection dropped in the office. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you, HOD.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. Oh, man. Is everybody down?
No, we can hear you, HOD. You just have to continue.
Chair, apologies again. We seem to be having problems in the office with the network dropping continuously. I apologize. Are you able to hear me?
Loud and clear, HOD.
Thank you. It's my sincere apologies. So there are instances, as I say, where one does need to look at the indicators with a fair degree of circumspect and being careful for which way round positive or negative performance should be considered. So I just wanted to make that point, and I'll get to the balance of that question in a moment. The second question, Chair, from Member Maseko about the number of vehicles set for inspections. Does that mean that 51% were not inspected? It does give you that indication in that there were not physical inspections undertaken, which from what I've understood is the core focus of that particular indicator. But as Mr. Carr did indicate, we're trying, and the team is trying, to then use other mechanisms to try to cover that. And then we'll also make sure that we try to put in place a program to catch up. So to make sure then that the inspections that were not done, we focus on those particular vehicles in this quarter of the new financial year. Then, if I may, through your chair, move on to Member van der Westhuizen's questions, and the first one around the environmental issues. In that instance, it was specifically the environmental issue was related to the Stanford and Hermanus project, where the team discovered peat on site. So when they were in construction, there was peat that was uncovered in an area that wasn't known to have had it, didn't come through in the original assessments. And that then meant that certain work has to be halted. Of course, it means that there's an extension of time given to the contractor, because it's certainly not the contractor's fault, and that it then means that the project wasn't completed within the time frame that was stipulated. So there are, of course, factors, as you know, that you only find out when you land up on site. You can do many assessments, environmental assessments, you can do your geotechnical assessments, but potentially when you land up on site, there is something that is unearthed, and that then causes a delay. So in the Stanford Hermanus meeting project, that was particularly the matter, that was where the environmental matter was unearthed, literally. In terms of the work. In that case, the indication from Mr. Fourie, and if need be, he can certainly give further information, is that we therefore have to do, because peat is something very special, there are numerous specialist studies that have to be done, work that has to go before we can then actually resolve the water flow problem and allow the project to complete in those particular areas. Then the question about the automatic vehicles and the discrepancy there in terms of the targets versus the actual, that has been impacted, your questions that you posed around chips and things, certainly, that has impacted the supply of vehicles, that has played a role, as well as in the overall replacement program of the vehicles. And that is, as you well know, linked to the national RT contract, RT57 contract, which in itself then is also impacted. And certainly some of the importation of vehicles with the global supply chain problems that we are well aware of. So certainly that is one of the key reasons for the lower numbers in terms of the automatic vehicles than was anticipated when we started and put the targets in up front. Then the question about the indicators themselves and which ones we feel are important, which ones I would say are critical. Of course, what we have tried to do over the years is reduce the number of indicators down to those that we believe do tell the story about the performance of the department, and trying to make sure that the indicators hold meaning, as opposed to just necessarily being a statistical report. There
I think your line has dropped again, Ms. Gooch. Maybe your technical people could assist in that regard.
Okay, my apologies. So that they have more meaning than just statistics, and certainly, therefore, I would consider that there are some indicators that are still set from a national point of view that are statistical in nature and don't add the kind of value that they should. Chair, with your acceptance, I've turned off my camera to try to limit the negative impact on the connectivity into the office.
All good, thank you, Ms. Gooch. We may proceed.
Thank you. So coming back, Chair, there are some indicators that I do believe are not as important in telling the story of the department and its performance in comparison to others. And I'm not going to sit through your chair now and perhaps necessarily go through one for one, but I think I trust that Member van der Westhuizen, you'd get a sense of why I'm indicating what I have in my response. If you prefer me to do something like that, I'm happy to do that as an aside and then provide a written input to the committee. Then through your chair and moving on to the questions that you posed, in terms of depots, and if I understood you correctly, you were referencing again the GMT side of things, because you're talking about inspections and data of vehicles being located and so on and deployed. There's really the 2 points at the moment in terms of depots for GMT. There's the one that's in the Southern Cape area in George that has been built and created, and where we are operating from to try to ensure that vehicles are closer for the relevant users. And then, of course, the one here within Cape Town, and the focus that we have of moving the team and making sure that everything's consolidated in Maitland. So we don't have a split, to my knowledge, unless the team have done from an operational perspective to help them at that level. But I don't believe that they've done a split necessarily between the two locations of the kind of data that you were referring to. Unfortunately, Mr. Ahmed is on leave today, given that it is Eid, and I would therefore just request, if you're comfortable, for me to confirm my response with him when he returns to work. But to my knowledge, they don't break it down between the two locations. Then your final question, Chair, around the budgetary implications of delays and so on, whether that would impact on our ability to achieve our targets from a financial perspective. No, the preliminary results show that the department was within the 2% norm for the end of the financial year 21-22. And I think what's important to understand is, given the nature of the work of this department, that we always have and have the ability to maneuver the plan slightly. And I think we have to understand that when we're talking about infrastructure, when we're talking about transport and understanding the interplay between them, that where we need to, if something's delayed, we're able to bring something else forward, or bring in other areas that are of importance that perhaps save us having to spend money on that in the following financial year. So that then means that we're still able to achieve our financial targets and our spending responsibilities, but still ensure that we deliver on our work that is the core mandate of the Department of Transport and Public Works. So we don't land up at the end of the financial year saying, well, this project was delayed and therefore we couldn't spend the money. There are a few of those here and there, but they're minor. And of course, when we land up with large amounts of our budgets being earmarked or particularly prioritized, provincial prioritization, that does limit my ability. And you might recall, as a committee, when we had our original budget meeting for the new financial year, we spoke about this particular aspect. And so as there are more limitations placed on the department or on any department in terms of the management, the accounting officer starts to have a little bit more of a battle to maneuver within the rules, within the laws, to ensure that we still achieve what we need to in terms of our outcomes, both financial and in terms of the delivery side. I trust, Chair, that I've responded to the questions. If there's been anything missed, I apologise, and please ask you and the members of the committee just to pick up on anything that I haven't sufficiently responded to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gooch. From my perspective, you have sufficiently responded to my questions, but I'm going to hand over to the members again if there are any follow-ups and questions of clarity that they would like further clarification on. You're welcome to raise it now. Notice that Honourable Maseko indicated that her questions were adequately responded to. Honourable Mavumbi, you have any questions you'd like to ask? Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognise you as a follow-up or question of clarity or a new question. You may proceed.
No questions from me.
Okay, Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I would like to propose, but we can leave that for the resolutions later on, that the kind offer from the HOD to engage with us on the targets and the target setting, and particularly the determination of what the department see as critical indicators of good performance, that perhaps we schedule either a session for that or ask for perhaps a written response to that. But at this time, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Mashego, you indicated that you'd raise your hand, or is it?
No, it was raising a hand. Chair, I just want to find out, and there was a program. I was trying to look on my notes. There's a program, I think, that Mr. Carr indicated that they experience a lot of dropouts of the students. And I want to find out from them that what are the challenges? Was there the COVID? And if that program was running before the COVID, was still the issue of the dropouts in place, or they just experienced that during the time of the COVID? And maybe the last one, it will be what the HOD indicated as the challenges of the taxi violence. And I just want to find out, because I mean the taxi violence has been a challenge for many years now. Do we, or is the department foresee or having the investigation? Have they maybe tried to get the investigation, an outside independent investigation, to try to equip them with the knowledge of how to react in advance to some of the challenges that they identify as the tax violence crop up? Because I tend to believe that because of it's been going on for a very long time, one way or another, we have to say, how do we go about, because we lose lives of people that really are not taxi owners sometimes, or taxi drivers. So we have to have something that really can empower the department itself to make sure that we can react in advance rather than wait to see as it happens, to go and listen what's going to happen. Something that can stop that before it happens. I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Honourable Mashego. I hand back to Ms. Gooch. Ms. Gooch, I don't know if you want to respond to those two questions.
Chair, thank you very much. And once again, if you don't mind, I'll leave the camera off. The first question around the reduction in terms of the dropouts, we have had previously, it's the contractor development program. We did have some dropouts previously, but the numbers were not significant, I would contend. So as a result, it wasn't something that came up and came to the fore. So certainly what the team are going to be trying to do is focus in this new financial year, the program on a far more regional basis, because potentially people have had to travel to a central location for the program, for the delivery of the different modules and the training, etc. And I do think that at times that is a problem for the various participants. So what the team have indicated is that they're going to try to make sure that they do it on a regional basis to as great an extent as possible, to see whether this is a way to mitigate what they've now experienced. Potentially, I am led to believe that there is a higher dropout rate that we've experienced in this last financial year than previously. And it could be, as I say, that given people's circumstances and so on, people have been going through a really tough time over the last few years. That's what's led to the higher rate. So we are going to try and do something different this year. and see whether we can mitigate that particular outcome and see better results. The question then posed around taxi violence. Let me say, certainly, I think the team have over the years, you're right, got an assessment, a view of what causes the violence, what leads to it, and understanding that there are numerous factors. It's not an easy one single solution. I think you'd all agree that taxi violence in and of itself is a multifaceted problem that needs responses from different areas, whether it is a legislative one, to the planning one that we've spoken about before, to the aspects around support to the industry, etc., which I know through your chair that Member Mvimbi often speaks about, the subsidization of the industry, etc. So there are aspects that our team are trying to build in to the various approaches in order to see whether this is a way that we can respond and try to impact in a positive way to reduce the amount of violence that has been seen historically within the industry. So that's why, as I say, you've heard us speak before about the planning aspect, so a big focus on that with the various municipalities, as well as then aspects that the team are building into the new transport and public transport legislation that they are working on. And even as you know and has been shared, that Blue Dot was a way, while we don't have the funds to directly subsidize the minibus taxi industry, and we are well aware that the National Minister of Transport has spoken about subsidization, and we all agree that it is important. What we've tried to do within our ambit is at least try something different and see whether it brings about a shift, as you well know, with the Blue Dot as an incentive program, understanding that it's not a direct subsidization program. So certainly through your chair to Member Maseko, I do think the team have got a good understanding of what causes, what leads to violence, and the interplay between the various associations and members. And we are trying the different mechanisms and levers at our disposal to respond to that in the ways that we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gooch. So members, one last time, you have any follow-ups you'd like to make? Thank you, Honourable Maseko, noted. If not, allow me to express my heartfelt thanks to the HUD and your management team for briefing the committee on the fourth quarterly performance of the department. I know it is very soon after the end of the quarter. It's usually not done as quickly after the end of the quarter, but you have really sort of provided us with a clear indication about the performance of the department, and you juxtapose some of these quarterly performance with the yearly performance as well, which provide us with early insight in terms of how you have performed over the course of the past financial year. For that, we are extremely grateful and thank you for the hard work that you have sort of expended in putting this particular presentation together, and for the work that you are doing on a daily basis to deliver the services that we promise our residents in the Western Cape. With that, thank you, Ms. Gooch, and thank you to your team. So colleagues, we will then proceed with the second presentation, and that relates to the Easter Road traffic statistics, and again it is a presentation that was prepared for us very soon after those sort of after the event. So we're very grateful that you're able to do that. And back to you, Ms. Coach, to direct us, who's going to do the presentation.
Chair, thank you very much. Appreciated. Within the meeting today, unfortunately, Advocate Kyle Reinecke, who would have joined us, has been diagnosed with COVID, so unfortunately he isn't able to be with us today. But we do have the Acting Chief Director for Traffic Management, Mr. Payne, in the meeting, and I'd like to request that he share the presentation. I assume that he has it available from his side to be able to share the presentation. And then I'll make some opening remarks. Mr. Payne, do you have it?
Mr. Payne, you're on mute.
Apologies. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. I just need to get the document. Just give me a second.
No problem. While you're doing that, I'll make a couple of opening remarks then, if you're comfortable through you, Chair, for that. So as you mentioned, the Easter weekend and the statistics, of course, fall in amongst a number of long weekends and school holidays, etc. So certainly it's important to understand that the provincial traffic management team overall, which is more than just our traffic law enforcement team, all pulled together to try to respond to this kind of operational plan and put together the operational plan to be able to try as best as possible reduce the number of crashes and to keep motorists and pedestrians awake and on their toes, so to speak. So the presentation that has been prepared, which it appears Mr. Payne is battling to find, and as a result I will do it from my side and quite happily then share it. Let me do that quickly because it seems, Farrell, that you're battling on your side.
Yes, unfortunately, HOD, I appreciate the assistance.
No problem at all. Let me just then go view and go a full screen. And then I will move the slides for you. But Chair, just to then indicate, as you've mentioned, that this particular information comes hot off the press as far as the Easter season is concerned, understanding, of course, that we've just completed another long weekend, which brings with it its own dynamics, obviously, and further information. So through you, Chair, Mr. Payne, I'm going to go on to mute and just then indicate when you want me to shift the slides.
Thank you very much, HOD. Chair, if I can start, the reporting period for, in terms of the content of this presentation, is basically from the 14th of April up until midnight on the 18th. We started off our launch with our Easter launch that took place at the Huguenot Toll Plaza, where the Premier as well as our Minister was present. It was a very soft launch in terms of media presence, and there were also other delegates, councillors from the area in attendance. That went extremely well in terms of the interaction, and it definitely assists when we have these types of launches to show the general public the interest that is shown in terms of their road safety. Next slide, please. Just the introduction, and again, I need to emphasize from the word go. Historically, we used to report, in terms of the Directorate Traffic Law Enforcement and what was achieved or what's normally achieved throughout the year or Easter or the festive season. However, it is basically a transversal approach that has been adopted for the past couple of months, where we actually refer to what was achieved as the Chief Director of Traffic Management, because everybody participates in it. And then also and later on during the presentation, I'll speak about our stakeholders and the role that they play, because it's also now further extended where our branch fully participates in all our interventions. But if I can just continue in terms of our Chief Director Traffic Management, one of our core mandates is for safer Western Cape Road, by providing a structured traffic law enforcement intervention coupled with effective road safety education and awareness, and that's more specifically referring to our Directorate Road Safety Management, as well as a communication strategy to positively influence all road users towards improved behavior while using our road networks. And again, later on, I will be referring to our colleagues at our Safely Home, that plays an integral part in terms of our planning and our operations and things that we post on social media. And I'll show you the positive outcomes in terms of the reach that we have in terms of social media, which has got a massive positive impact in terms of what we actually achieve as well. So as part of our tactical approach, which included our Easter period, as well as the significant long weekends and respective school holidays. And this year, we've had quite a few of the long weekends, and we had to anticipate and actually go back into previous data to see exactly what patterns were, so that we could actually do our planning as such. And it helped to a large extent. And I'll speak later on about the fatalities, and the one in particular that actually had a big impact, or the negative impact, in terms of reducing our fatalities over this period. But during this period, in terms of our Q1 planning as well, it will bring some seasonal changes, and we can all see the changes in the weather patterns, which may have an impact on visibility, environmental conditions, and sporadic road incidents due to inclement weather and related road closures. So we are basically, we basically ready in terms of what our tactical approach would be, and it will have a big impact in terms of our operational planning and deployment as such. Thanks, HUD. In terms of our integrated tactical approach, there were some focus areas, more specifically our distracted driving, excessive speeds, driver and vehicle fitness, our vulnerable road users, which is still a big contributing factor to our fatality rate within the province, our passenger and commuter safety, moving violations, and then of course driving under the influence of alcohol. And I'll speak later in the presentation more specifically about the driving under the influence of alcohol and what our way forward is for 22 in terms of our planning. Thank you. In terms of our Easter operational mandates and planning priorities, the Easter period 22 was aligned to the national 365-day road safety calendar and the Western Cape Provincial law enforcement objectives and operational mandates. Firstly, to promote a safe and reliable road user environment on our road networks, prevent all possible loss of life and road user crash and fatalities, to regulate pedestrian behavior and reduce the fatalities, encourage voluntary road user compliance during the Easter period, and there were some positive results, which is also reflected in the presentation, and I'll touch on when we deal with the statistics. And then, of course, by applying the general rule of law to all road users. And I just need to pause there, because what we've achieving in terms of applying the rule of law, it has got a positive impact, and at some stage or another we just need to test it in terms of exactly the reduction, as HOD rightfully mentioned. It's about taking the statistics that we do present and actually putting it into context. So we actually will measure a particular intervention to see there's a reduction in the amount of people that's charged, right? And that to us is a positive indicator, and it's reflected in our stats, as I said later. As part of the Chief Directorate Traffic Management, our Directorate Road Safety Management executed 10 road safety education, communication and awareness interventions at our various traffic law enforcement operations, which focused on adult pedestrians, freight awareness, which is increasing on a day-to-day basis, our public transport and drive and vehicle fitness, safety belt awareness, alcohol and speed awareness. If I can just give an example in terms of what we achieved for the fourth quarter for safety belt awareness, we still have a huge amount of people in terms of non-compliance, including our front seat passengers as well as rear seats. And because we have specific operations in terms of seatbelt awareness, you can actually see that there's a massive spike in people being charged in terms of safety belts. In terms of our alcohol and our speed awareness, that's also high on our priority list because we believe that is a contributing factor in terms of our crashes and things that's reported. And one of the things that we're still trying to wrap our minds around is that so many accidents that has been reported over the past quarter as well as the previous year is where people lost control, and we're just trying to figure out and interpret exactly what that loss control is. It can be one of many reasons, but it's not clearly articulated within the accident reports as such. And then the following sub-directorate, which is within our Directorate Traffic Training and Development, our Quality Management and Evaluation team, they evaluated 8 identified traffic law enforcement operations based on the approved Easter plan. And the reason for them evaluating the operations is to ensure that the operations is actually set out in terms of the tactical plan, but more importantly, based on our data to ensure that our officers are deployed correctly. When I speak of that, for example, we can't set up a roadblock at the tunnel and there's things happening 5 kilometers away on either side of that operation. So that's things that they will analyze. They will determine exactly what the outcome of the location, time, deployment, briefing, everything is concerned, and provide a very critical report in terms of the efficacy of our planning and deployment as such. Thanks, HUD. In terms of our mandates and our planning priorities, we followed a 3-phased approach, which was basically our pre-Easter, Easter weekend, and then of course we couldn't ignore the Freedom Day, Workers' Day long weekend, which had a significant impact on our traffic volumes, especially over the long weekends as such. But in terms of phase 1, it was from the 1st to the 12th of April, and the focus area was road safety awareness and education. The second phase was from the 14th, the Easter weekend itself, from the 14th to the 18th, where we had our exodus and entry operations. And what we did this time around, we actually physically reduced our amount of fixed operations, which enabled our patrol staff or our operational staff to actually conduct wide range patrols to increase visibility instead of everybody being clustered at one particular point. And it had positive outcomes, and we will still analyze that information and data further in terms of exactly the impact that it did have. But from our preliminary findings is that it worked fairly well. And then, of course, the final phase was again the exodus and the entry. And if you just look at what we've experienced with people returning yesterday, we had something like 1,600 cars per hour coming through the into Furlands, back into Cape Town, and about half of that leaving the Cape Town area, and hence the wide range patrols that have been instituted over this period. But as part of our operational mandates, we focused on our fatigue management operations, which worked well again on the N1. And we passed the pilot phase, even though we're still trying to rectify 1 or 2 identified shortcomings, but we've introduced it on the N2 as well. Our public transport and passenger overload and safety. We still had our weighbridge and our freight awareness, driver and vehicle fitness, where we deployed our vehicle testing units to certain operations that we planned. Our alcohol enforcement. Even though we're reintroducing the breath testing, our equipment as such is still by NAMISA, the service provider, to do the calibration. But you'll see over this period that we're still arresting people for drinking and driving, and their bloods are being drawn as part of our evidence. And then we also focus in this period about the habitual offenders in terms of vehicle licensing, average speed over distance, transgressions, illegal public transport vehicles. Our moving violations, what we've done in each of our corridors, we have a task team that's been appointed on all our major routes, the N1, the N2, and the West Coast N7, and they would focus specifically on moving violations, and that's actually turning out also to show some positive results at this stage. Our speeding, our average speed over distance, camera network also assist in this. Our safety belts, pedestrians, it is still a fundamental problem, and we're trying to deal with that as far as possible. And then part of our planning is our interprovincial corridor operations with our neighboring provinces of the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape, and that works extremely well. And then our integrated SAPS operations, who is basically one of our core operational partners at this stage. In terms of them using our facilities, they join us at the roadblocks, they focus on their operational mandates while we conduct ours, but it also is a force multiplier at our fixed operations as such. Thanks, HOD. I spoke earlier about our communication. One of the platforms that is proven to be extremely successful. Our Safely Home team will deploy some of their staff to our operations. They would take necessary photos, and they'll actually put it out on Facebook and Twitter. And if you look over the period from the 14th to the 18th, they posted 20 of these interventions because we want the people to know where we are. We want the people to see what we are actually doing over this period of time. And the post that was reached was just over 1.5 million people. There was 162,144 engagements and 10,064 likes. So if you just look at and where the world is moving to in terms of social media, you can see the positive impact, but also year on year, we can see a significant increase in the amount of people that's actually following and our Safely Home engagements on Facebook and Twitter. And for the intents and purposes, I have not included, the billboards and everything else that they're doing, but just reflected the two social media platforms. Thanks, HOD. The 2020-21 comparative Easter weekend stats, right? I need to note that all our stats is verified. It's daily verified operational and fatality stats was submitted to the National Department of Transport and the RTMC as part of our structured reporting for the Easter period. And the reason why we keep on speaking about daily verified stats is that we're one of the only provinces at this stage that actually use our forensic pathology services data sets. The reason for that, it is far more accurate than what, if you compare what we report and what National has from the CAS system, from the police system, the variant is so large that, we slowly but surely, I believe, try getting them to accept our stats as being true and verified as such. But also, the reason why we're actually pursuing and trying to convince National to adopt the forensic pathology services report is that, and this 30-day rule is not taken into consideration when it comes to reporting from other provinces and nationally. But what we do is our fatality statistics is based on the 30-day rule of any person killed during or immediately after a crash, or death directly attributed to a crash within 30 days of such a crash. So that's basically part of that international standard as well. And we closely monitor this. So, when we get to the end of the 30 days, then we can actually verify that that was actually the amount of people that actually passed away on our roads as such. It is also important to note that the statistics does not include that of the local authority traffic services because the data is not subjected to stringent verification processes of the Chief Directorate. It puts us in an extremely vulnerable position because of So, you know, the figures that we do project, it might seem a bit low, but bear in mind that it's only provincial traffic services, and we cannot subject ourselves to report on something that cannot be verified at this stage. Thanks, HUD. This is just a quick synopsis of what was achieved for the period the 14th to the 18th, and we sat with an overall fatality increase for the 22 compared to 21. We had the 35 compared to the 26. But then also you'll notice that for the same period, there was actually a reduction in car crashes in the province. Now, when I speak of the information, especially about our fatalities, this actually includes the local authority areas, because all of that information is gathered by our forensic pathology service. So if you look on our provincial roads, in 2021, we had 7 fatalities and 5 crashes. In 2022, we had 18 fatalities and 5 crashes. And I just need to pause there because, unfortunately, on Good Friday, in the early hours of the morning, after we painstakingly shepherded and did what we could with our Exodus program, past 4 in the morning, we had a bus colliding with a minibus that was stuck on the side of the road, right? And then in the initial report, when it came through to us, was that there were 11 people dead on the accident scene. And then the 30-day rule came into play again, where unfortunately an additional 2 people passed away after the accident scene has been cleared up. So we had a total of 13 fatalities just in the one crash. If you look at and you subtract the 13 from the 18, you would have seen that we would have done actually reduce our fatalities. And again, you know, we can't be all over the show in terms of our road network and our extensive road network, but it would have actually shown the effects of the law enforcement strategy and the operational planning that we would have sat with the reduction of fatalities, especially on our provincial roads. In terms of our municipal roads, we had 19 fatalities in 2021, and there was a reduction of 2 fatalities and a reduction of 5 crashes on our municipal roads. There was, however, if you take our vehicles stopped and checked, if you do the comparative analysis, we stopped more vehicles for this period. In terms of our integrated law enforcement operations, as I said, we drastically reduced our fixed enforcement operations to increase visibility. And if you look at the amount of fines issued, even though we had less law enforcement operations, the fines for the various traffic violations actually increased 2022 compared to 2021. A big increase was also shown in terms of our vehicles that was discontinued and impounded. And this is contributed, and it's been contributed by the deployment of our 2 vehicle testing units that has been upgraded in terms of software, branding, and everything to go along with it, and the dedicated staff that's been allocated to operate our vehicle testing units. But this figure has not only been done by the vehicle testing unit staff, but also to our officers when they get to an unroadworthy vehicle. In terms of our vehicles that has been discontinued, right? And then if you look, our vehicles that have been discontinued and impounded, that is basically our public transport vehicles, with 35 with discontinued and impounded. And that basically also contributed to, in terms of our passenger safety for our public transport vehicles. There's been an increase in the total arrest. And again, Chair, if the members of the committee want, I'm not going to go into the finer details in terms of what the arrests were, but there's been an increase in the amount of arrest. And then also there's been an increase in the arrest for the amount of people arrested for driving under the influence. Thanks, HUD. Okay. In terms of our technology that we're using, because we get live data when our officers use their handheld devices, we can now determine if people are producing or presenting fraudulent documents, and that month on month, it's showing an increase. So eventually the message will get out there that we will nab you if you try to present false documentation to our officers, and it's showing good dividends. There has been a positive reduction in terms of the arrest for speeding. However, and this happened just outside the reporting period, just to give an indication how people from, I would like to think from other provinces, still think that they can have a total disregard for our other road users. We arrested somebody on the 19th of April, where this gentleman, he was driving Mercedes-Benz. He went through two of our ASOD sites, our average speed over distance sites. And in the one site, he was doing 184 kilometers. And in the final site, in the final sector of the ASOD, he was nabbed at 207 kilometers an hour. So he was arrested, and it's not actually reflected as part of the statistics because it took place on the 19th. But it just goes to show that, you know, people are still being reckless out there. This gentleman from Northwest, you know, they nabbed him, and I think he was pleasantly surprised to actually find out that our infrastructure actually still works in this province. There's been an increase in the amount of reckless and negligent driving, and this can be contributed to the task team that has been established and deployed at specific times and locations. And then also there's been just one arrest for our inconsiderate driving. Chair, if you would like, in terms of time, you know, this information, the final breakdown that is available, I can provide it to the committee if you want to take your time and peruse exactly the breakdowns for the various types of arrests as such. Thank you, Chair. HOD, thank you. In terms of our 2022-23 road safety plan, part of our vision, inspired priority, is that nobody should still be killed, injured, and must feel safe traveling on our road network. In terms of our mission is to conduct integrated traffic and road safety initiatives in order to correctly achieve our vision. And again, you know, we will still have our further engagements with our colleagues at the local authority, but SAPS has already bought into the concept of the integrated approach, because we both benefit from our mandates that we receive. Thanks, HOD. The statement of intent in terms of 22-23, Chair, if you like, I don't have to go through all of this. I see we're running out of time, and I'm sure there will be questions. But one of the things that we're definitely going to focus on, and again, we currently have a student intake of 90 students. We want to ensure that they all successfully complete their training and graduate in December, which will add to our current human resources as such. And then also we want to focus on the deployment of our e-learning module refresher training programs for our existing staff. And we need to play some catch up, you know, due to COVID. For example, our compulsory firearm refresher training, it's something that's high on our priority list as well. Thanks, HOD. Next one. The HOD gave a very detailed explanation of the various types of targets and indicators. Again, in terms of 22-23, taking our students that graduated in December last year, we factored that in. So there's been an increase in terms of the target amounts for the various outputs and our output indicators. But the output indicators will basically give guidance to our operational planning across the province in terms of dates, times, and locations. And I don't want to go through each and every one of it, but for the purpose of what we want to achieve, again, from a transversal approach, you'll see the last two includes our road safety management and training and development as well, and we'll be reporting as such on our indicators. Chair, thank you very much. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell, for the presentation, and I'm going to open the floor for questions and input from members. Colleagues, Honourable van der Westhuizen is now recognized here. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for that presentation. And I want to say thank you very much to each and every official that worked over these long weekends, particularly Easter weekend. I do know that many of them would have loved to be also going away with their families, that also would have loved to spend time with their families. And I really appreciate this. Chair, I'm a particular supporter of roadblocks and the work that's being done, particularly with the technology that we now employ in the Western Cape. There are, however, a few aspects. The first one that concerns me is the matter of vehicles with foreign number plates. I am concerned because recently I was told that there's no database or access for us to the database of our neighboring countries. And I do notice a marked increase in the number of vehicles with foreign number plates, particularly in certain towns in the Western Cape, which makes use of farm labor, etc. And my first question is, what is the possibility for us to initiate talk, and I presume that should be at a national level, to be able to share the databases of our neighboring countries with our traffic database. The second one, failing that, is the possibility of building up our own database of foreign registered vehicles, so that if that vehicle is stopped today for, let's say, speeding, then tomorrow that same vehicle, can be stopped, and that we build up a record of such a vehicle, possibly even later on impounding that vehicle, should circumstances warrant that. So that's my first question: our actions against foreign registered vehicles and perhaps also their drivers. The second one, Chair, is I was also informed by our MEC for Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning that Operation Pakisa was again, I almost want to say, relaunched over the Easter weekend, and that there have been a number of actions. And I presume that this involves also not only nature officials, but also our traffic officers. And my question, therefore, is to what extent have we seen with these traffic law enforcement operations cooperation from other entities, the South African Police Services, inspectors from, say, for example, Cape Nature, etc. Then my first question, Chair, is regarding our way bridges. Perhaps if you could just share with us, I know many years ago there was an experiment to kind of privatize our way bridges. Perhaps if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us if that is still the situation. And secondly, Chair, I'm concerned about people trying to circumvent our way bridges by driving over secondary roads. And obviously, the person that deliberately avoids a way bridge is somebody knowing that his or her vehicle is overloaded. And what actions can we do to avoid that kind of behavior? And then fourthly, Chair, I do realize that, and I think it was clearly illustrated in this presentation as well, that a single incident can play havoc with the statistics. Now, in this particular case of it seems to me a standing vehicle, I often see vehicles with their red triangles behind them, but then the triangles are quite often only a few steps away from the vehicle, whereas, if I'm correct, the regulations actually say that they should be placed 45 meters, and I don't know if that's a minimum or just the general rule, but 45 meters from the stationary vehicle. And I was just wondering whether we shouldn't start an education campaign for these vehicles that require red or reflective triangles to use them correctly in cases of emergency, and whether in this case of this stationary vehicle, whether it was a case where a reflective triangle was warranted, or was it just a vehicle that stopped to, say, for example, pick up passengers or attend to an emergency with a passenger? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Mvimbi, I recognize you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, because where I am, I've got serious network problems. Sometimes it's on and off. But anyway, Chairperson, 2 or 3 questions really. The first question, you must forgive me, Chairperson, if maybe I'm asking on issues that might have been answered, because as I indicated that I've been in and out because of network problem. My first issue is around the issue of this Safely Home. Now, I know Safely Home is a Western Cape program that you only find here in the Western Cape. If you go to other provinces, I haven't come across any other province that has come up with a program or something called Safely Home. But I know that it was supposed to be either something that is competing or complementing what we call is Arrive Alive. We know the national government got a program that is also a program of the province of the Western Cape of Arrive Alive. So, but then the Safely Home program, I just want to check whether was it a program that was supposed to be permanent, or is it a program that was supposed to be transitional? Because I know it dates back from the time of the then Transport and Public Work Minister, I think was Robin Carlyle. I think it was launched then. And I thought that it was something that was going to come and fade. But I see, if you look at then, it's probably more than 10 years now. If then it's a permanent program, is it really bringing any results, giving any result, or is it not a duplication of what is supposedly called Arrive Alive? That's my first question, Chair. I know it was mentioned now and then, yeah, but I don't know for how long. Maybe there might have been further elaboration or clarification on it while I was on and off line. The second question, Chair, I wanted to ask is I see the program, the Easter safety plan is more also, it's talking a lot about education and awareness. Just want to check whether who is being educated here. Is it an administrative awareness process that is among traffic officers, or do we at some point involve communities in this education and awareness program, especially these communities that are living along the national roads? So I just wanted to check whether this education and awareness, for whom is it targeted for? Is it the community participation program that is meant to conscientize the community along the national roads and most of our frequently used roads about the road safety and the like? Whether who is it really targeted for? Who are we conducting to, and who are the beneficiaries of this public awareness and education program? The last question, Chair, of course, it might be also very relevant here, but it normally happens a lot during the festive season, but I think obviously during Easter as well. We'll have live to God. There is everybody knows right through the country, especially in the Western Cape, that there is an area called the Dorrance, and it's along the N1. And we know sometimes a lot of festivities that are taking place along that road. whether it would have been interesting to hear that maybe from, I know in December there has been quite serious fatalities that took place along that road, and there's been serious challenges there. Have that maybe come down? Has that been brought down during the Easter weekend? Has there been any changes? And also, are there any plan maybe that we are preemptive plan that we are putting in place in order to make sure, not necessarily for the Dorans, but I know the whole of the N1 sometimes, especially during the festive season as well as during the Easter, is normally a very hectic road, and it sometimes produce quite a lot of road injuries as well as fatalities. I just wanted to check whether, since there is a comparison between the festive season as well as the Easter season, has there been any, have been able been a market improvement in terms of bringing down the statistics there? And also, are there any other preemptive plans that we are actually having in making sure that we are managing that area, especially that area along the N1 as well as the Dorrance area? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Vimbi. Any of the members would like to pose any questions or comments? None, thank you. Mr. Payne, I hand over to you, back to you. I see the Minister has indicated his opportunity to speak or make an input. Minister?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, if I may, I'm going to switch off my camera because for connectivity, if that's in order. But I want to just respond to one question. My apologies, HOD and Mr. Payne.
Please proceed, Minister.
All right, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much. I want to speak to the question raised, one of the questions posed by Honourable Mvimbi with regards to the Safely Home program. As he correctly indicated, Safely Home was initiated by the then Provincial Minister. And Chair, I think it's important to note that the impact that Safely Home has had on the provincial roads and decreasing fatalities on the Western Cape roads, bearing in mind that the Western Cape roads was once one of the most dangerous roads or provincial roads in the country. So if you look at the stats between 2009 and 2020, Honourable Mvimbi is asking about the impact. We've seen a reduction of 46% in road fatalities during that period. So obviously the Safely Home campaign is, road fatalities. And when I took office, I made it clear that one fatality is one too many. So all these initiatives initiated by the department and in conjunction with provincial traffic and various other law enforcement agencies is ultimately to ensure that we keep our roads safe. So it's ultimately to the benefit of the road users, and it's not necessarily just motorized users of our road that gets targeted through these programs rolled out by the department and Safely Home. We focus on pedestrians, and if Honourable Mvimbi looks at the statistics over the last couple of weeks, I release provincial stats on a weekly basis. The increase that we're seeing on pedestrian killings is also increasing. So with that focus to ultimately ensure that we educate, we expose commuters and pedestrians to the safety aspect of roads in the province. That's all in collaboration with the department and Safely Home. So it's not necessarily just a social media enforcement campaign, but it's actually on the ground educating and with various programs within the branch that we focus on. So I think it's what would be a good suggestion is perhaps if Chair through you at our next big integrated traffic roadblock that the standing committee joins us, and then with Safely Home being there and see the impact that directly has as on commuters, as well as when we do the pedestrian education at various schools and in various communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. I'm sure we will take you up on that invitation when it happens. HOD, I hand back to you or to Mr. Payne, whoever is going to respond to the questions.
Chair, thank you very much. I'd like to also just pick up on a couple of the points ahead of Mr. Payne, who I'm sure will deal with a lot more. So perhaps the points I'd like to just ask him to respond to, just so he's got a heads up of which ones I'll deal with, is on the integration and the cooperation with other entities. So the question posed by, through you, Chair Member van der Westhuizen around that, as well as then picking up on some of the points that I may not cover in my responses to his other questions, as well as then the detail around the third question posed by, through you, Chair Member Mvimbi, and some aspects around the comparison between the Easter season, Easter focus versus the festive season side of things. The first question around the foreign number plates, as Member van der Westhuizen has mentioned, we don't have such a database. It would be very difficult for us to, well, not difficult, but potentially we've got a question building that particular database on what basis and with what information necessarily, other than us stopping a vehicle and getting a number plate. But his point about linking up with national, I think it has been raised by our teams, the traffic management team, with the traffic law and traffic law administration sections with the National Department of Transport, but we will flag it once again with them, with the points that have been raised. The aspect around the way bridges, just to indicate, of course, that we do have and put out to tender the operation of the way bridge to private companies. So in other words, that's the physical operation, but our traffic law enforcement officers are present and are required to be present when a vehicle is going to be pulled off, diverted in, and then dealt with if there are any issues. So it is not a, let's say, a full privatization in totality, but certainly an operation in terms of the physical running of the weighbridge itself, as opposed to departmental staff. The point about circumventing weighbridges is something that the team and the department has had a lot of discussion about and is wanting to utilize and deploy our technology to test. We've got some ideas around being able to utilize the technology, picking up vehicles before a weighbridge, so along the main route into that would be traveling to the weighbridge, and then actually doing a check to see whether that vehicle comes through that area or if it's picked up just past it on the kind of return route of the deviation back onto the main route. And by implication, then seeing or identifying that that vehicle has bypassed, probably deliberately, the weighbridge for some reason, whether it's because it's overloaded, whether it has potentially illicit goods, or so on, and that will then allow our teams to deploy to then go and pick up that vehicle that has diverted. So that is work that is underway within the traffic management team, along with the roads team. So it shows an integration and a requirement, obviously, for the two parts of this department to work together. And it's in that way because we do agree with you, through your chair, with Member van der Westhuizen, our concern around vehicles perhaps trying to avoid way bridges and the subsequent law enforcement that occurs. So that is work that we are doing. The point that he raised around the reflective triangles, and as you say, where they should be, how far the distance, I'm going to defer to Mr. Payne's hopefully far better memory than mine of the legal provisions as far as that's concerned. But I do also want to flag that when we picked up these incidents that are occurring where vehicles are stationary or potentially traveling in the shoulder, it is worrying even as just a traveler, and I'm sure that you see it, that there seem to be more and more vehicles that do generally travel on the shoulder of the road, which of course in itself is concerning, because you need to make sure that you've got a good sight distance in front of you, and potentially something may come along, or you may land up coming into a vehicle that is stationary, or a pedestrian who's walking along on the shoulder of the road, and you are then not able to move back into the main lane of traffic because you've got other vehicles that are moving past you. So I do think, and it comes to the second aspect around the education and awareness, that certainly through a lot of what I've seen on Facebook and the posts that the Safely Home team have made on Facebook, that they do try also in that way to educate people, to remind them that there are dangers of traveling in on the shoulder of the road. That's not what it's there for. It's not another lane of the road for you to be driving in generally. You need to be driving as you should in the traveled way. I do understand that people are courteous and move to the side to allow faster vehicles past, but one must remind people that that has to be done when it is safe to do so and you've got the sight distance ahead of you. And of course at night it does become even more dangerous or distinctly problematic to do so. So I'm sure Mr. Payne may want to add to that, but I have also asked the team to pick up as far as that type of general awareness and communication is concerned. In addition, if I may, to Minister Mitchell's comment and feedback around the Safely Home link to and versus Arrive Alive, I think it's important to also understand and remember that Safely Home for us is a year-long ongoing program and annual calendar with different areas of focus month by month, whether it's seatbelt, speeding, cell phone usage, pedestrian safety, and so on. Whereas until recently, Arrive Alive has tended to be a seasonal focus when it comes to the festive season or Easter. Recently, the DOT and the RTMC have started to bring in their focus of the 365 days, road safety aspects. But certainly, I concur with Minister Mitchell and confirm that the results have been brought through with the focus from Safely Home that allows us to bring different elements together in an overall and comprehensively integrated approach to road safety within the Western Cape. And I think with that, Mr. Payne can also respond on the education and awareness program, but what was put in the presentation about the 10 road safety educational communication and awareness interventions that were conducted. There are interventions that happen both at the roadblocks, and he can pick up on the kind of community level interaction that is also held, as well as the final point about the comparison between the festive season and the Easter season side. So through you, Chair, to Mr. Payne, if you wouldn't mind picking up on the integrated operations and then the other points that have been flagged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, HOD. In terms of the integrated operations, we gladly welcome cooperation and provide any form of assistance to any department that needs such assistance. Unfortunately, we weren't approached about Operation Pakisa, and we will definitely follow that up. It's the same approach that we would follow with the farm workers, where we will speak or we get invited to other standing committees as well to show what we are doing to assist in dealing with the problems. But unfortunately, we never heard anything from Environmental Affairs about Operation Pakisa on the ball from the West Station. And then just in terms of the safety education campaigns, you are 100% correct, HOD. Again, it is not our awareness programs and education programs do not just take place over the Easter and December period, but throughout the year in terms of the various regions or the various districts, and it takes place at our schools. It even takes place at our courtyards, at garages, in the general community. So the footprint is fairly large in terms of our awareness programs and who and where we can target, especially if we know it's it's a problem area as such, and again the outcomes is fairly positive with the assistance of Safely Home, as well as our Directorate Road Safety Management. They will actually go so far as to book some radio slots that deals with specific geographical areas as such, to get the message across, to promote the road safety awareness. That's part of their core mandate as such. Also, if I can just add in terms of the way bridges, to add to what the HOD has mentioned, as part of our tactical planning, all of our way bridges, we've also got portable operational way bridge equipment, and we are aware and we will monitor secondary routes as such, and we'll have regular operations to do such cleaning. As part of the legislation, if we do find that people are overloaded, we've got all the right to actually direct them to the official way bridge for them to be weighed as such. And yeah, that happens on a regular basis as well. But the camera network will also basically, that we have been speaking about, will also greatly assist us going forward in terms of that. In terms of the dorings that was mentioned by Mr. Mavimbi, is that for the reporting period that we are reporting now for Easter, there was absolutely no fatalities recorded in the dorings area. And when we do our tactical planning across the province, we actually extrapolate data from our integrated transport hub, which will actually give an indication in terms of exactly where our fatalities is happening, and that's all types of fatalities, including pedestrians. And we will plan accordingly. And that's exactly what we did now over the Easter period in terms of our long range patrols that was executed. And unfortunately, the incident where the bus driver drove into the stationary taxi because of a tire burst that he had, that was not identified as one of our hazardous locations, or that particular spot has not previously been identified as a hazardous location. And just in terms of the triangles that was spoken of, they're saying it needs to be placed at least 45 meters behind any stationary vehicle as such. As part of our inspections of our public transport vehicles, that's one of the items that is checked in terms of it being functional and it's in the vehicle as such. Yeah, so I trust that I covered all the balance of the questions through you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gooch, and thank you, Mr. Payne. Colleagues, are there any follow-up questions you'd like to pose? Anything that needs further clarification? Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognise you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the responses. The point that I'm trying to make is I believe there's a need for an educational campaign regarding the use of reflective triangles in the case of stationary vehicles, because my observation has been that people don't adhere to that 45-meter distance in putting out these warning triangles. But since Mr. Payne also referred to another burst taxi tire, I have got a background in education, and as it goes, often schools have these 15-seater minibuses, and I once took the time to read through the manual of this vehicle, and I then discovered that this particular vehicle's recommended tire pressure was 4.2 bar for the rear wheels. And when I asked at the local fueling station, for them to up the pressure of that vehicle with a fully laden load, long distance, trip, I was met with a lot of skepticism. And I also believe that an educational campaign, not only to taxi associations and taxi drivers, but also perhaps with our our fuel station, attendance might be valuable, because I've been led to believe that it is not, tires that are pumped to that kind of pressure that lead to blowouts, but it's actually driving with tires that are not properly inflated that leads to blowouts due to those tires overheating, etc. So the point I'm trying to make is, I'm just wondering, to what extent can the department consider educational campaigns with our taxi associations, with our fuel station operators, etc., and with the general public? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. I don't know if I want to say, ask Mr. Payne to respond to it, or whether I should just say noted, because the number of fuel stations and we have in the Western Cape, because there are too many for our budgetary capabilities to do education to that extent. But nevertheless, I'm not the spokesperson for the department. Ms. Gooch, and back to you to wrap up, please.
Chair, thank you. You're right. The suggestion is noted, and I do agree that aspects around education, even on the reflective triangles and so on, are elements that the team can bring in. And there are ways that we can, through various programs, when we are working with different industries, to at least try to carry across particular messages. So it doesn't mean that we necessarily go out and are spending huge amounts of money focusing in one area, but we are able to try to, through the different networks, convey the sentiments and the type of information that, through you, Chair Member van der Westhuizen is mentioning. And I would like to then just perhaps say from my side, thank you very much for the opportunity to engage with the committee this afternoon, and for the positive feedbacks, the positive questions and aspects to be considered. It is sincerely appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gooch. From the committee's perspective, we'd like to thank you and your staff for having sort of brought us up to date in terms of the past term and past weekends of very hard work that you and your team have put into it, and we are very grateful for the time and effort that you have presented in terms of the execution of your tasks and your responsibilities. I know we got information that is, so to speak, so very fresh out of the oven. We appreciate it very much, and we wish you well, and may you continue to deliver the services and exceed the level of services that we render to our people. But before we let you leave our meeting, I want to just hand back to the Minister if there's anything in closing the Minister would like to say, and then thereafter the officials and the Minister may leave our meeting, and the members will remain behind to consider in-house business relating to the committee. Thank you, Minister. You have any closing remarks you'd like to?
Thank you very much, Chair. No, just to echo the thanks from the HOD to the committee for the engagement this morning, this afternoon, for the manner in which we could engage, and always if there's any additional information that's required, we'll be more than willing to provide that information. But Chair, I think it would be remiss of me not to, on record, thank Mr. Payne and his team that has continuously worked over the Easter weekend, but also during the long weekends. Thank you very, very much, sir, to you and your team for the work that you do in order to ensure that we keep our roads in the Western Cape safe. And then thank you very much to the HOD and the rest of the team online for always going over and beyond. It's much appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your presence also and your sort of input into the meeting. it is always appreciated that that you with us and that you hold us accountable and we hold you accountable, and so it goes. But all the best, and have a wonderful day further, and yourself and the department may exit our meeting, and the members will remain behind to deal with other business as well. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Oh, and so here we are, just a few of us, Jan. Colleagues, before we do seeing that the engagements are still fresh in our minds, are there any particular resolutions that we will look at now that we would like to adopt? Honourable van der Westhuizen, I note you. Okay.
Chairperson, I want to come back to my notion regarding the targets and the target setting. And if we could ask in writing from the department an indication of the performance indicators or the targets that and a breakdown, which of these are national targets, then the provincial targets, and perhaps then the targets that are unique to the Western Cape. Critical, regarding some of the targets, but in the past it has been said that, some of these targets we have got no choice over, in the sense that they are prescribed by national government. And I understand also nationals need to have some standardization across provinces. But if we could get a breakdown, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair, you are on mute.
Well, load shedding has started earlier.
Thank you, you're so funny. In terms of the two depots that we have, remember the HOD says that we have two depots in the Western Cape, and that one is in the Garden Route, and wasn't sure whether they have statistics for the separate two depots, one in Cape Town and the one in the Garden Route. So maybe we could just, in the form of a resolution, ask the question whether, the statistics for the two depots are all circulated separately, and if so, could we then have the statistics relating to what we say, the number of traffic fines processed and crashes and losses, incidences, processes, vehicle inspections, vehicles, alternate fuel vehicles in the fleet. How are those sort of expressed in relation to the two depots? Because I think that it is necessary for us to know if they do have these separate statistics, how many vehicles are there and how many vehicles are there, and those kind of things. Honourable Maseko, I recognize you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I don't know. I just want to find out, the question that I asked about the issue of the crashes, that from the report it indicates underperformance, of which the underperformance has to be celebrated in that, in a way. I'm trying to find how can the department maybe change that to be an achievement rather than the underperformance, because like the HOD was explained that if they said they are anticipating maybe to have about 3,000 crashes, and then they get 2007, it's underperformance per the target, but it's a good thing that happened. So I feel like it doesn't qualify to be on there as a performance indicator, but I don't have an advice of how can we go about to remove that as a performance indicator, because if they don't reach that number, it becomes something else. But another one that, Chair, I wish that we can talk to, and you and my colleagues, you are well learned, you can help me. There is a trend of, you know, I was in a Uber and then I was driven by a guy that you can see the license. I don't know how did he get the license, but that doesn't come from the Department of Transport. They can only check if the license is there. Are we empowered sometimes to choose a municipality to go where they issue the licenses and to sort of engage with them to find out? Because there's been some of the indicators of where the licenses are being given, but something doesn't add up in some instances. Do we have something that can empower us to go for an oversight like that, or to engage with municipalities on that basis or not? That's all for me that I wanted to find out, Chair. Thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you, Honourable Seko. I think we can explore that. I'm not fully educated enough to be able to give you a response, but I think it is something worthy to explore and see what we can do about it in terms of such an observation from your side. I just want to come back to the crashes, as you were saying, and why could we celebrate this a good thing? I think it is, you know, it's an indicator that exists, and perhaps, you know, we can have a discussion around whether we should retain the indicator. If you anticipate that 100 crashes will occur, and therefore it will have sort of financial implications for the for GMT, and then because the 100 crashes, you know, is a result of many factors, and 50 crashes occur. So instead of the 100 that you anticipated to occur, only 50 occur, and that's great. And so then it's a good thing. But when we are engaging with the GMT in George on the 18th, and then maybe we can put that on the table again and then get their response and take it from there, if it's okay with you. Right, thank you, Honourable Seko. Honourable van der Westhuizen, is that a new hand or a legacy hand?
Indeed, Chair.
Okay, you may proceed.
Chair, I want to propose as a resolution that we ask of the department in writing feedback for each of the way bridges in the Western Cape for the months of March and April. A, the total hours of operation. Second, the number of vehicles weighed. The number of vehicles that were found to be overweight, and the amount of fines issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen, and perhaps we can combine that with a oversight visit at one of these way bridges as well. Thank you. Honourable van der Westhuizen?
Yes, thank you. Excellent. I second that, and I hope that we would be able to learn more about this model whereby the Provincial Traffic Department assists these, let's call it private operations of the way bridges. It's a very interesting model, And I think one might perhaps in the future even explore other options of let's call it private public partnerships in law enforcement.
Thank you, Honourable Van der Westhuizen. Colleagues, any other resolutions you'd like us to consider? Going once, twice, thank you. Jan, if you've got those.
Thank you, yes, Chair. I'll put them together and I'll run them by you again, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Listen, so yeah, now we can proceed to the adoption of the minutes and those other reports that we have.
Chairperson, that's correct. What we do is let's do the minutes first.
Okay.
Is
Okay,
it-
colleagues, yes, the minutes of the last meeting we had. That's I think it related to the budgets, appropriation bills, 16th of March. I've gone through it. I am quite happy with it. I don't know, say, are there any corrections and additions that you'd like to, that we've missed, I've missed, that you'd like to propose? If not, can I have a mover that we adopt the minutes?
I move that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Van der Westhuizen. Move and seconded by Honourable Maseku. Thank you, colleagues. Jan, can we move on to the next report?
Chairperson, the next is the quarterly report for January till March.
Okay, good. And colleagues, at page 1, check are there any corrections and omissions and additions you'd like to make? These reports are circulated last week. I've gone through it. I'm happy with it, but then again, we all need to be satisfied of its correctness. It's the last page. I think there's attendance. There's only one, I think, Honourable Vimbi, that was absent for one, apology for one meeting, and he attended the other meeting. Right, and then the cluster visit week that was conducted from the 8th to the 11th. At the budget. Yeah, can I just speak to that budget quickly, please?
Chairperson, no, that's just to indicate that this was the original budget. And then in the course of the year, they have adjusted our budget, and that was our expenditure at the end of the financial year.
Financial year. Now, is that amount going to be rolled over?
Chair, no, unfortunately, this money doesn't get rolled over. The reason why it was also adjusted was that we were going to conduct the hearings for that bill during this last financial year, which then never happened. So the public hearings will now happen this financial year, and unfortunately, yeah, this money doesn't get rolled over.
Okay, thank you. And Rob van der Westhuizen, I recognize you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose that we adopt the report.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Seconder. Okay, let's move to the next report.
Second that, Chair. I'm a second out.
Thank you, Honourable Maseku. Yeah, can we move to the last report, and that's
Chairperson, this is the report of our annual activities. That's now everything combined.
It's page 1. Let you move on. Page 2. Any omissions or additions that you'd like to make, colleagues? Page 3. That's the last page, colleagues. I've gone through it and you also received it. Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognize you.
Okay, Chair, I again propose that we adopt this
Thank you
report.
for that. Thank you. So there's a proposal, Honourable van der Westhuizen, that we adopt. And Honourable Maseko. Thank you, colleagues. Right, that brings us to the end of our agenda, right, Johan?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Under General, Chair?
Oh, General.
Yeah, I'm coming to that now, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Under General, you have?
Chair, we have an upcoming visit to the Southern Cape, and Mr. Coetzee informed us of some logistical arrangements, and he's waiting for our responses, whether we are going to make use of WCPP transport to the airport, etc. Chair, taking into account that, our time is limited and valuable, I trust, I was just wondering, the indication was that all expenses to get to the airport or to park at the airport will have to be covered by our enabling allowance. Now, I was just wondering whether it wouldn't be possible for this committee's budget, since we've been completely under budget in the previous financial year, to cover at least some of those expenses, such as, say, for example, where I believe it's the cheapest option for me to travel straight from home to the airport in private transport and to park at the airport, or alternatively, for me to be able to make use of an e-hailing taxi service to the airport and afterwards to get me home again, to travel, first to the WCPP buildings, then to the airport in a group where one often has to wait and obviously have to build in additional time, I think is not the most economical option, taking into account, as I've said, that our time is also, money and valuable. So I was just wondering whether we would be able to investigate the possibility of alternate methods, and secondly, then that being covered by the budget of this committee.
Okay, thank you. Noted. I agree with you. I think that since it's a committee event that's taking place, that we certainly could, sort of that kind of expenses should be incurred by the committee and not by the member itself. Honourable Maseko? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to see myself on TV. I agree with the committee decision, Chair.
Okay, you look so beautiful. Thank you. Colleagues, Johan?
Chairperson, just quickly on that, I would like to, if members can just indulge me, I will just find out exactly what the process is. But in terms of the members' guide, that is sort of what's prescribed is that members utilize the enabling allowance. I have spoken to members' affairs, and Petronella has indicated to me that if members, or what's most beneficial to members is that if they do utilize their own transport, they park and they pay their parking ticket, is to keep that, and one day later on when you submit your tax return, is that you then write off those from your tax claims, or I'm not exactly 100% sure how it works, and that will be more beneficial to you, as opposed to claiming the money back and it gets paid out to you. But let me rather go and inquire about it and find out if we can do it like this, and then I can revert back to the committee.
I think if maybe I can come in the past, what used to happen is it's usually advisable if you use the Uber to go there, and then but use the shuttle that will give you the receipt, and then from your enabling allowance, you will get to be refunded. When coming to the parking, always it becomes too complicated. Easier method is the Uber receipt, and then you get enabling allowance to pay you back.
Okay, thank you. Whichever method you think will suit you, you may utilize that. Uber, own transport, WCPP transport, or your feet. It's also good. Thank you, colleagues. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you, Johan, for putting this all together, and Nomfundo for your kind assistance behind the scenes, and Candice for your being on standby to provide the necessary technical assistance. But for our members, thank you, colleagues, that you have engaged vigorously with the department on the presentations, and that you have availed yourself to make this meeting a success. May you have a wonderful day further, and all the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.